Hey everybody, it's Bruno on NB, where not everything has to be serious, and totally excited to have our second episode with Arian Guedes, who's a registered psychologist at New Vista Psychology and Counseling Services. Arian, thanks for having the courage to come back for our second session.
I guess I'm gluten for punishment, Bruno.
Oh my gosh.
I'm kidding. I'm joking. This is a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, you know what? There's nothing really fun about having issues in certain areas, but I got to tell you that we do have fun when we're chit-chatting, and I always really appreciate everything that you do. Now, I know that our caption says the four factors of divorce. We're going to go through one. Divorce or breakup, we're going to go one, then two, and then three. You know, that's normally how you do it, don't you? But anyways, but what I'm saying is that just before we start, it's not a little game, but I need to tell you something that most people don't know. They kind of see you're a registered psychologist, et cetera, very successful in your new business. But I must tell people out there that Arian is a very accomplished business person also, and you had, a couple of careers before this. And the reason why we say that is because this is really a business publication, business platform, and it's not just to give advice, but boy, oh boy, when somebody from business or other fields that you're going to explain come to you and they go, geez, you know what, I don't think you really understand. You're just a clinical person. Would you mind sharing your background, before you became a psychologist, and then we're going to talk about why you're a psychologist later, but tell us, you have an amazing background.
Yeah, I was quite lucky actually. I started my first job at United Nations High Commission for Refugees, and that's where I got the idea, why I want to work in mental health. And then I work as a career counselor, and then I work with you, Bruno, at DMA. So we had a lot of fun.
For you.
Did HR and recruitment, and that was a lot of fun. So just meeting people, connecting people. So, and then after that, I just followed my dream. I never thought I could accomplish it, but hey, I guess if you just put your mind to it, anything is possible. And then I followed my dream. So I came to the field of mental health.
And I love the fact that you're sharing that, and I hope you don't mind that, because I think people would really like to hear stories, and this is where we highlight people. We're going to touch on that maybe in another episode, but I got to tell you, if people are watching and kind of said, you went from here to here to here and you weren't successful, I can firsthand say that you were incredibly successful in, call it, our field. And when you decided that was time for you to take another step, a lot of people were quite surprised, because we're saying, wow, you're leaving kind of at the top of the game to follow a path that maybe won't be successful for you. You might end up not liking. How was that first step for you?
Oh, I remember that, Bruno. Well, I had good mentors. You were an amazing mentor. Okay. And I don't know if you guys know, Bruno is the published author of 2 books. So I learned a lot from you. And I remember Tony, your good friend, he did say, you're crazy, you're leaving this field. This was my dream, and I always wanted to get into the field of mental health. I'm fascinated by human behavior and resiliency, and how under kind of any circumstances human has the capability. So yeah, I had good mentors, and it's the community. It's a community effort, so I didn't do it alone.
Well, super, super, super proud of what you're doing, because you're really successful in this one over at New Vista Psychology and Counseling. And we're going to talk about the firm in a second, but why don't we go right into, I guess, the number one factor that predicts divorce or breakup? Oh boy, this is too serious now, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So a group of researchers about 40 years ago, they wanted to investigate what is it about that we have such a high number of divorce rate, breakup, and also, or if people were married or they were living together, but they were not happy, 90%. So they did a research, and they came up with 4 factors. They call it the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, that they predict divorce if they are not eliminated. And what are they? I'm just going to quickly share my screen here with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Excellent. So they are called the four horsemen of the apocalypse. The first one is
Can you
criticism.
be more dramatic? Oh my
Absolutely, yeah, criticism. So what is criticism? When you feel criticized in a relationship continuously, and criticism, the problem is never resolved because verbally you're attacking your partner's personality or character rather than addressing the issue. And the second one, this is the biggest predictor of divorce, which is contempt. Contempt is very subtle, and people who are in this type of relationship, the person who demonstrate contempt, they show a sense of superiority, and they are subtle and comes in the form of mockery, hostile humor, sometimes non-verbal, eye-rolling, sneering, and if the relationship continues, it leads into something called as a codependency, as a love-hate relationship. And the partner who has experienced contempt, they will even have it impacts their immune system. They will have a lot of health issues if this continues. And that is the greatest 90% guarantee, the greatest of that will cause divorce. The third one, defensiveness. Defensiveness, again, does not solve any issue. The partner now get defensive and we escalate the situation. It stays in that emotional rather than going deeper to what the actual issues are, what are the needs, how can these resolve. And if the three top horsemen continues, the fourth one is the stonewalling, or as we call it, silent treatment. Now both partners withdraw from the conversation, the conflict continues, resentment is built up over time until people call it quit. So what can we do? What are the antidotes? The first one, instead of...
Before you go there, Arian, can I pause you for a second?
Of course.
No, because I want to touch on that for sure. Is, do they kind of go 1, 2, 3, 4, or can they kind of go 3, 2, 1, 4? I know 4 is the last one, but do all 4 have to be present to have a real divorce or breakup?
Usually they are, because if you're judged or criticized, what is the first thing we do? We get defensive. If somebody comes and say, hey, you are always late, the normal reaction would be, of course I'm not always late. I was actually early last week. So that continues. This is the absolute, because the person feels attacked, judged. And generally defensiveness is the next. And when the two horsemen, as we call it, continues, the third one is contempt. Now the person feels a sense of moral superiority. Now they become inflexible. There's no compromise in the relationship. So the relationship turns into a battle of competition. And now the partner who has experienced this, they could have contributed to any of them. Now they withdraw from the conversation, is stonewalling. And the partner who has been critical, they become even more critical because now they're angry because they feel not heard, validated, or understood. So generally, it is kind of one leads to the next. But the most hurtful of all is contempt, which, as I say, the nervous system picks up. And we can't even actually identify that because it's so subtle, it's through nonverbal.
Wow. So you're going to talk about some, I mean, you're not going to remedy the situation, but maybe were you going to point out maybe some quick little identifiers / remedies?
Absolutely.
You've already promised in the last episode, we're going to come back, break these things down to make it really, substancy, I guess. Right now, these are just the identifiers.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the antidotes, or what can you do? And I'm making it oversimplifying this, but in couples counseling, when you come, you learn each one separately. The first one, instead of criticism, we could express our needs, how we feel about the situation, and then state your needs and expectation about one issue at a time. Because if there's 2-3 issues, that again, it could be quite overwhelming. And instead of defensiveness, we take responsibility. We acknowledge our part, our role in the conflict or disagreement. Taking responsibility generally diffuses the situation, and instead of contempt or showing mockery, sarcasm, or hostile humor, then we actually build a culture of respect or appreciation. We do want to focus on the things that our partners do right as well, not just on the things that they don't do. In a stonewalling, instead of stonewalling, the antidote, take 20 minutes break or half an hour and come back, reconvene, or set up a time with your partner that let's talk about this. We want to come back and talk about it. Rather than leaving the issues unsettled. Because if you feel overwhelmed, it's okay to take a short break, about 20 to half an hour, and then come back and discuss the issue.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, and I'm very careful not to say it's like whatever when I'm talking professionally with you. You're a professional. And I think that's I know that's one thing that I've learned from you. Even when you weren't certified, registered, psychologist, and you never played the psychologist part, but you did teach me that sometimes you need to just listen to an expert and not try to recreate your own reality about that. Is like stonewalling. Like if you are, you are. If you're in contempt, you're contempt. Like it is what it is, and it's not your own. It's not my perception. It's the other person's perception that you can't control. Correct? Remember.
And absolutely, see, this group of researchers that they have done it for the past 4 decades, they came up what works in relationships that do make it when they're 85 and holding hand and they're happy. They didn't stay because of financial issues or children or religion or cultural stigma. They stayed because they wanted to. And these things have been actually organically have come from the couples that they have figured it out. And that is why I think the beauty of it is that once we learn, and you're quite right, the concept of understand before you're being understood, which this is also part of when we do the couples counseling or family counseling, to offer empathy, understand your partner's world before we could even solve or offer advice or solution. So 100% understanding is the key.
Coming back in another episode, and we're going to talk about what makes a healthy relationship, right?
Absolutely.
But just before you go there, I think this whole thing about 4 factors of divorce and breakup it's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of really shocking to go from, I know some terms, because I'm not an expert, but basically when you first meet somebody, stereotypically you're love bombing each other because you're so like infatuated, and then you go from that to I hate your guts, and that could happen in 1 year, could happen in 1 day, or whatever the relationship is. But isn't that like a big shock to the system when you go from one to another?
Absolutely, and it doesn't happen that like it builds up. And you're quite right. The 4 stages of falling in love or relationship. The first one, infatuation, which we call it limerence. And the second one would be that commitment. Can I commit to that person? And then the 3rd stage that you do commit. And it's over time, it builds up. If we don't communicate our needs and expectations early on and attune to each other, we'll talk about the sound relationship house, how to build a healthy relationship. If we don't, then the relationship becomes transactional, that you take the garbage out, that you pay the bills, rather than understanding each other's inner world, fear and doubt. And over time, if it's not communicated, then the 4 horsemen takes over. The communication of that connection, attunement is gone. It just becomes like, a different dynamic. So you're quite right. In the beginning, it is like, wow, everything is beautiful, But
well, that's a registered psychologist, Arian Guedes from New Vista Psychology and Counseling, and you can get in touch with the link down here. So when somebody calls you, the initial, conversation goes like what? Let's spend 2 seconds on that before we go sign off and come back in a little while.
Absolutely. They could get a free 15 minutes consultation, or they could come for the first session. We do assessment, and then based on the assessment, their needs, and then we develop therapeutic goals and go from there.
Oh, that's awesome. Arian, I love this. So your advice is incredible, and I know we're going to come back, and the next time we're going to be talking about a healthy, what makes it a healthy marriage and relationship. So thank you very much, Arian.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember, if you want someone to be our next guest, simple. Click below in the description and we'll get in touch with them. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe, and you'll never, ever miss another episode.